It's a world full of walls, so let's imagine windows instead. Imagine windows that connect. Imagine windows that protect. Imagine windows that unite. Imagine windows that open minds. Imagine windows, not walls. Eternia.
At Eternia, we are on a mission to create the best windows the world has ever seen. And that is why every window in our product portfolio offers uncompromising safety, world-class aesthetics, and a customer service you would have never experienced before. But that's not all. We want these windows to fill our spaces, to fill our homes, our schools, our offices, and fill these spaces with laughter, with lighting, and with a lot of inspiration. But can we do it without the piercing insights of experts like architects and interior decorators? People who have spent their lives studying spaces and how it affects our lifestyle, our feelings, and most importantly, how it affects our behavior. We value this insight, and that is why we bring to you Authentic Insights, a platform where we will bring to you renowned architects to share their life experiences, to share their expertise, and how they look at spaces while designing it. How can you increase the lighting in the house? How can you increase the space utilization in the house? How can you bring more of the outside inside the house while at the same time keeping it safe, keeping it protected? How can you increase the aesthetic of the house with small changes? So we want to bring to you all of these through this platform, through their experience and through their expertise. What we also want to share with you in this is how Eternia can make a small contribution towards enhancing the experience of your house. We encourage them to share their Eternia experience, their honest view of the Eternia experience, our service offering, the nuts and bolts of our product, and most importantly, our people, Tribe Eternia as we call them. In effect, Authentic Insight is our small attempt to bring to you everything to do with indoor and outdoor spaces at your doorstep, and as a result help you create spaces which you and your family can cherish and create a joyous life around. It is our attempt to create a world which is ready to imagine windows, not walls. Thank you.
Hello and good evening, everyone. Welcome aboard this webinar discussion where the topic is Reinventing Traditions, Modern Architectural Elements. We have an illustrious panel of architects and designers here that include Ponni Concessao of Ponni, Oscar and Rahul Architects, Sriram Ganapathi of KSM Architects, Arvind Rangan of Varuna Associates, Bharath of Mancini Enterprises, and Lorenzo Lilli of Eternia joining us all the way from Italy. Welcome again, everybody. So let's get started. It's going to be a little bit of history because without the past, there's no modern. We're going to be talking about what we feel is Indianness in our context, the materials that we use, and the elements that reflect the past and the future that go into space making and creation of our buildings. There is this quote, India lives in the past and the future. We live 2,500 years of history together. This is Rumi Khosla, who is the scholar architect based out of Delhi, where he describes the peculiar circumstances of an architect working in India. The nature of our country is that we are very diverse, enormous regional, climatic, geographical, cultural differences. So is there a singular Indian identity? Post-independence, we are left with the legacy of the British Raj, with classic examples of Indo-Saracenic architecture in all the presidencies, and the most iconic of which is the much talked about now Central Vista and its surrounding buildings. I guess the initial generation of Indian architects struggled with the weight of this legacy. And then at some point, we started seeing the emergence of what we call modern Indian architecture in the works of B.V. Doshi, Charles Correa, Raj Rewal, that came out of largely a response to post-World War European modernism, not necessarily out of a specific Indian identity. So are we as architects today, even after 75 years of independence, still struggling to find what is modern Indian architecture in our works? Or does it bother us at all? Is it regional? Is it global, local, or glocal? I pose the first question to Sriram. It's open to anybody else who wants to take this also. Sriram, how have you in your practice addressed the question of Indianism? Is that something that consciously or unconsciously has an influence on your work?
So thanks, Sunil. Hi, everybody. I think I'm not very fussed with this whole Indianness thing at all. I think today we are in a shrinking world, and there is information that is shared all across the world instantaneously. So there is nothing that we do here that cannot be seen anywhere in the world, and vice versa. There was a time in history when everything was so specific to one particular geographic domain that people would not be able to go from one place to another, and they had to travel physically and so on. And today it's just shrunk so much that anything and everything is exchanged everywhere. So that, I think, really doesn't, I think we're just global, we're just one entity. However, we have locations that are specific to different geographies, and we have different climates, and we have different weather patterns, we have different lifestyles and cultural things that we are all a part of. So that becomes a context. I would say today's architecture is always driven by the context it is a part of. So my point here is that, if you decide to be specific to one particular context, and it happens to be India, then that piece of architecture is now become Indian in our today's parlance. But in my opinion, it is contemporary, it is happening now with the current needs and requirements, with the current material resource that is available, and a part of the context. And so that's my response to your question.
Yeah, so I get it. So the thing is that the context is probably more important than anything else. And we are living in a global world. So your responses are probably typical from that perspective. Arvind, any thoughts from your end on this?
No, hi everyone. Hi Sunil, and good evening to all of you. I very much concur, and my sentiments very much echo what Sriram just shared. Indianness, yes, but that is something which is subconscious, because as architects, we, and as a fraternity also, I think we should place our solution on the context, whom you're designing for. So I, for one, allow the site, allow the client sometimes to even set the context, and the location matters. We could be designing something in a hot, humid. I think our country culturally and in so many ways it's diverse. Even climatically, it's very different. You could be designing a home in a hot, humid climate like Chennai has, or you could be in the north where it's dry. So the elements influence all these, kinds of parameters, and you could be doing something in the hills. Like in Kodai, we build homes. So each set of site demands a certain, a sensitivity that we need to show in our work. And so I think the Indianness comes through in all of this, basically because we are, from here, and we subscribe to this this context. So I think, yeah, it's sort of subconsciously, inadvertently, it comes through, but not actively practicing it in that sense.
Okay, so good. Ponni, meaning in the sense that you have built for the state. Not too many people actually get to build for the state, and specific to the project that you've done for the Telangana government, which is the secretariat there. The state is a powerful entity. It sort of determines what do you call it? What the people are about in Israel. So yeah, I'm sure you've been answering a lot of questions about the Telangana secretariat over this period of time. It's modern yet Indian. Tell us about the architecture of the iconic secretariat and the Indianness in its architectural language, or is it global?
Okay, at Oscar, Ponni, and Rahul Architects, we are more or less contextual architects. We believe in picking the local characteristics to all of our buildings in terms of, the architecture, but also there are generic characteristics like courtyards and large verandas, which are there in practically every part of India. So that becomes a common denominator, but the architectural characteristics we pick purely from the context. So if you look at the Telangana State Secretariat, this was a competition project. They picked up to about 20 to 30 architects from all across India, and the competition ran for 12 months. It went back and forth to Hyderabad. And the reason why our design was picked, because it was more very, very Hyderabadi. We took the context that the plan as such was a pure temple plan. The courtyard, then the verandas around it, the Vastu element was very, very strong. And so far as the architectural facade was concerned, our inspirations came basically from the palaces, temples, and the other larger public buildings in Telangana. It was a happy mix or a fusion of all these kind of architectural characteristics that came in. And remember, a secretariat is a seat of the state's power, administration, what have you. And secondly, it reflects the aspirations of the people of Telangana. And if you see, Telangana, like just about any other Indian cities, had the ancient Hindu architecture, and then we've had invasions from the Middle East. So that stamp of architecture came in. Then we had European invasions. So that set of stamp came in. So if you see the facade, and this is the only secretariat in the world that has had 34 domes. And I will tell you, the inspiration of the dome came from the Hanuman temple in Gujarat, the Vaitishwaran temple in Tamil Nadu, and the Ganapathi palace. So just about every architectural feature was a happy mix of all of these, the background of Telangana as such. And the reason why the chief minister and the technical committee, there was actually a 500-man audit committee for this. They all went in for this because it was a great fusion of what Hyderabad and Telangana stood for. It has 2 dome tower complexes that is again unique in the world. And this is one of these are actually the strong reasons why, our design was selected. And to be very honest with you, I was worried after the building was built, because this was a very heritage architecture, and we didn't know. And most people in the architectural community tends to dismiss heritage architecture. At least that's been our experience. But the response we got from the people of Telangana globally, it was just phenomenally amazing. And that validates our, our opinion and our stand that contextual architecture is what people emotionally connect to. In Tamil Nadu, we built a secretariat, which was eventually turned into a hospital. And later on, when the new government came in, there were proposals of turning it back into a secretariat, which was shot down by the people. So the message that at least, or the lesson that we learned is, contextual architecture is very, very, very important for people to have an emotional connect to the building. It's net that we build for the people. So that's what really worked in Telangana.
Interesting. So the emotional connect was probably most critical thing. I see a lot of Indian elements from what you explained from across the country. Also, I think all three of you have actually touched upon the aspect of climate, meaning climate is often a very big influence on our work. In traditional architecture, we have a lot of responses to in-between spaces, like the veranda, thinnai, as we call it here, the courtyards, which again you spoke about. So my next question is to Bharath. there is a strong response in all our work, and also especially with your work at Mancini, um, with light ventilation, climate, it plays a big role, I think, in your practice too. Knowingly or unknowingly, we sort of respond to this in the sense that, so how much of reference do you draw from traditional Indian elements, like in the sense, like the in-between spaces, like the veranda and the courtyard in your practice?
Thanks, Sunil, and good evening to all co-panelists. I think it's a very interesting question. And these in-between spaces, as you put it, are sort of many a times in the flow of things become undermined in the current context of planning and things. And I'm quite serious about it. Us and personally, I think these spaces are very, very important as they form a part of the experience in terms of the way you perceive the volume of the space, right? And with regards to the context of how they flow through and the how do you actually amalgamate that into the current context of postmodern buildings, that's where I think the key aspect is. Personally, we take a lot of reference to how it has been traditionally worked out in terms of the courtyard, in terms of the right proportions of these courtyards and how they actually deal with the nature itself. And that somehow is becoming a challenge in the coming day, in the current days, in the way we're using these spaces, right? The function of these spaces were pretty strong. You take the Thinnai, for example, it had a pretty strong function. Whereas in the current context, how do you use that is the key on how these spaces actually are going to be looked at contextually with regards to the building and the surrounding spaces that it has.
So it's almost like saying you probably will have an air-conditioned Thinnai at some point. Okay.
No, we actually have had cases where there is a question of how do we cool down terraces, open spaces, and all of that, and that's where the current requirements, the current context, and how do you actually see these spaces architecturally? How do we find that balance becomes the key.
Right, great. So another key aspect to a lot of this is envelope. So building envelope or skin is often the first expression of a building. It's used to protect, shade, also express a cultural identity. Okay. So my next question is to Lorenzo, because this is quite much your domain of expertise. You're a facade designer. You play a very important role to what architects do in the modern context. I see a lot of your work is across the world, and a lot of your work could be technical. Also, I guess you're working with a lot of architects in all these domains that you're working in the Middle East. We had a conversation yesterday, so I understand which are the continents. I wouldn't even say countries that you work in, continents that you work in. Okay, so I have a question to you. Can you tell us of any of your projects? It's a slightly different question from what you probably come across, where there is any project that you worked on where a cultural or regional context has played a major role in the design of the facade, outside of it being just a technical exercise.
Yes, thank you, Sunil, for the question. This is a good one, and good evening, all the panelists. There are, I wouldn't say one specific project. I would rather refer to one specific country, which is known to be highly design-centric. This country being UK. UK is a country with a strong heritage, a stronger architectural heritage, which is translated into some specific materials, actually, which have been used. So, and this is also in the last years becoming a trend, in fact, for the envelope, and is also posing the stone the challenges in the envelope. So I'm specifically referring to the bricks. Bricks are very traditional in the British culture and in the United Kingdom actually culture more generally. So what is happening at the moment after a few years where the architecture was ruled by the fancy glass? I'm talking a lot about the facade in their traditional extent. The facade is essentially seen as an element made of aluminum and glass, or eventually some add-on, mostly metal, whatever kind of metal. So this is the general perception of what a facade is. Well, as I was saying, in UK specifically, after a few years where the facades, the envelopes, and the architecture was driven by those standard materials, there was a high impact of the tradition. So these facades started to talk a different language, and the architects started requesting this integration for these new materials. So more to give to the envelope a more materic appearance. So this is what I have experienced highly. And it came that we figured out actually during the development that using these different materials, these kind of integrations has also led to either innovations from a technical perspective and to benefit in terms of the usage of the building, like better living experience for the people using the building, or as Ponni was saying very properly, better impact on the community, which is more open to see something which is in line with their tradition.
Great, Lorenzo. So yeah, it's interesting that you're working with elements like brick, and in India we use brick a lot, because we do have a heritage which comes from Europe, especially from the British era. Okay, my next question is to Arvind. How important is the skin or the outer layer of a building to you? Is it climatic? Is it a response to context, type of building, industry, regional, otherwise, in the sense that how does, is it a response purely out of the function of the building, or is it more than that?
I personally, if you ask me, I don't attach so much importance to the skin of a building. I allow the skin or the facade or the elevation, there are so many words we use, to organically grow along with the design. Now, having said that, but I mean, I don't want to sound irresponsible. It also depends on the kind of building that you're doing. Well, let's say you're doing a commercial building where you need to bring in a lot of quality light because of LEED and so many other reasons where you want to be energy efficient. Whereas, let's say, as compared to a school or an educational institution, or say you're doing a home or an apartment project, housing. So each genre of work dictates what the facade could be or should be. But I don't do the skin treatment as a sort of an embellishment, but I see that it blends with the environment, with what the site context is, what the neighborhood buildings are, or what is the purpose behind doing a facade. So I try not to be reckless in that sense. And so for me, functionality and response to various factors which influence design are more important for me than say just the skin But having said that, we do work with a lot of facade consultants, and who bring in a lot of technical know-how, and they have that that extra edge which they bring to a project. So I value that a lot. But for an average project is what my immediate response would be. I mean, when you came to that question.
Mine was not necessarily skin as in like an add-on. Skin can be just not add-on also. Okay. Anyway, just moving on. See, all our buildings have openings. That is the interface between the inside and the outside. In other words, doors, windows. What does a door window mean to us? It lets in light. It does help in cross ventilation, climate. It's sometimes also a picture window in the sense that I remember going to a house designed by a professor of mine, Leo Pereira, and study table with this small little window because you could look out into the lawn. Like, it's just purely meant for that purpose. So how important is fenestration or the attitude of a window to us? Sriram, what does a window mean to you?
Oh, everything. I think sometimes if you look at architecture, there are different ways, there are different definitions, but architecture is actually planting something that did not exist in an empty space, which was open, and you're placing something there and kind of filling it up. And invariably, it is meant to house people inside. So by definition, seems to be a very clear gap between what is inside and what is outside. So the only connect that you have inside such an enclosure is your little window or whatever size of window that helps you look out into the outside. And for us in our practice, especially, I think this kind of making the outside come inside, the inside go outside. I mean, it's actually almost brought down to a cliche. I mean, in our architectural study, we've always been talking about this, but there have been some brilliant pieces of architecture done by Indian architects where you really don't know whether you're inside the building or you're outside the building, whether it's like we were speaking about the third space, the verandas and courtyard spaces. And in the absence of that and the need for conditioning space, then, the window plays a very important part. So we need to bring in as much of light inside. And I'm saying with all this green and this environment story that we're talking about, fundamentally, it is just not using more energy than we really need to, which means that there is so much of daylight. Like in India, we have 365 days of daylight, unlike parts of Europe where we have 150 and 180 days. We have 365 days of daylight, and it's a crime if we don't let in daylight into the spaces, and we really should not be using artificial light at all, the amount of daylight we have. So opportunity is through windows, whether it's windows on the walls, whether they are skylights or whatever, but I think it's extremely important in our practice, and it should be, I think, for almost everyone over here. So yeah, I think windows are really important.
Right. Yeah. So materiality is also very important for our projects. Okay. So there are traditional materials like the simple brick or the laterite block, modern array of manufactured technical materials at our disposal, meaning in the sense that at one point of time, in the sense, if you take a historical context, there could have been only one kind of material that you could use. Today, the choice is innumerous. So the thing is that it's at the disposal of the architect. Matter of fact, the non-technical materials have moved to the background, and it's all the technical materials which are largely in the front. Okay. Ponni, is there any work of yours where material has played the driving role for the project? What has influenced the choice of material, modern or traditional or vice versa?
Philip, is that for me?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Materiality is everything in a building for two reasons. One is that in today's time, again, I'm going back to the Secretariat. We were building this building at the time of COVID. We had no choice. Everything had to come out of Hyderabad. And COVID has taught us a lot of lessons. And besides, historically also, it depends how you use material. So if you took the Telangana Secretariat, we had the podium, if we call it the lower ground floor, that was about 15 feet high. It was all sandstone. And of course, that came in from stocks that was already had come in from Rajasthan. It gave a kind of a nice, base effect. And over that, we built in masonry, which was painted white. And over that, on the last floor, we had, sort of a sloped roof. So, and inside of it, we used a lot of marble, a lot of granite. The portico itself, one of the largest in the world, we used a lot of dressed granite. So I think materiality is everything in a building. It brings out the richness. It brings out, it brings in the soul of, actually, it is the soul of the building, really. You're creating a building that, then brings in a lot of positive feelings towards the end users. So materiality in my book is important. It depends how you use it, because it has got two effects. One, it emits energy. And in these days and times, I always say use natural materials, because then it emits positive energy. Second, it brings in different types of scale, texture, beauty, harmony, proportions. These are the basic principles of architecture. And I think materiality then defines all of these basic principles in architecture that we all study, theory of architecture, what have you. Not only does it have an aesthetic effect, it also has a very, very operational, functional effect. So in the Telangana Secretariat, we use a lot of marble flooring, white and green marble flooring in certain areas, the high-end areas. And then we use a lot of polished granite, flame granite for the steps, and then polished granite for the inside of the corridors, what have you. And that gave the richness of the space. So in terms of aesthetics, in terms of operations, in terms of, just texture, materiality is everything that governs and gives beauty to a building. We look at historically, you see the Taj Mahal, it's the beauty of the marble that comes through. And then you look at other historical, beautiful temples, our own temples that are all over the country. It's the beauty of the granite that comes through, and that dictates the proportions. You can work on these materials. You can carve on them. And these are things that I always tell my students. I have a very hectic practice, but I have a foot in academia as well. Unless you study your history and unless you study the science of materials, you're never going to be able to build beautiful buildings. And indeed, they dictate and they are the cornerstone of creating beautiful architecture.
Great. Yeah, so that's really great to hear from your end. Bharath, it's a similar question to you. How big a role is materiality? Meaning, from what I've been seeing or following your practice, I know that material is big. The second question to this, it's a much simpler question. What determines the choice of a window, timber, aluminum? What's the material choice on something as simple as that?
Well, I think I will answer it along with your earlier question, which is on the skin, right? Like you also mentioned, it's not just the skin, right? You look at it as an entire build-up of the facade. And materiality or the choice of material for a window or any other aspect has to fall within the context of how that entire build-up and where it's going to sit in. And if I just take over from what Ponni had said, which is there are all these basic principles of architecture that we follow. Materiality follows caters to a very large aspect to all those principles, right? The choice of windows, whether you're doing, whether you want it to be a timber window, whether you want it to be an aluminium, or whether you want it to be cotton, steel, etc., is defined by the context of your design, what is your build-up, and also the aesthetics that you want to have. And if you combine the functionality of what it actually has to do, then you're pretty much come to your choices that you can work with. For example, you're talking about a classic inspired building, let's say, and your build-up of your walls, what would have been traditionally stone walls. Are we still doing stone walls? Are you doing dry cladding, and hence your build-up is of a certain kind? How do you actually shade your windows? And hence you also started with the aspect of how these things were limited in those days, all these choices, right? Because in that particular place you could do it in only a certain way because the materials were limited to those. It could also be the technology. Till the industrial revolution, you could do very little things, right? The windows had panes, and that is because you couldn't get glass beyond a certain size, and hence you had the Georgian bars or muntins. So I would go back to the context of where these things are coming and how these windows play a big role, which Sriram beautifully put. I actually sprung up when he answered and said that windows is everything, right? So it's a key decision, and I would put it in terms of the context of all the aspects that we just discussed, and then you get your answers. And of course, the big question then is, can you get what you are imagining? Can you customize that one? Because you're limited by few factors, budgets, whether it's actually doable, whether you've got the time to do what you want to, or you pick up the closest possible one that that fits into all of these things.
True, very true. Yeah, Lorenzo, again, coming back to your area of expertise, any unconventional materials that you used in your facades, and what influenced the choice? These are a couple of questions I'm just clubbing together. You could actually answer it on the fly. What is the future of facades? What are the innovations which are happening in the world? What have we not seen in India yet? What does the future hold for us moving forward?
I have used in so many different materials. I can say I have used pretty much everything available as of today, from something very traditional to something very new. For instance, again, if we have to refer back to Europe, is the one of the main countries where the technology evolves in terms of facade. So one of the trends in Europe now is to implement in the facades new materials, kind of old but made new materials. One of these is called UHPC, ultra high performance concrete, which is essentially an evolution of what the GFRC was, with different technologies and different reinforcement. So these shields are now becoming a trend to make the facade more metallic, as I was saying before. What is not available in India? This kind of integration actually still is not there, or at least in few cases, for what my experience in these few months I joined in Eternia is about. So most of the projects I've seen, facade projects I've seen, it's about aluminum glass and metal cladding. Very few are having different things. Even though I'm experiencing that the evolution of the Indian market, as Sriram was saying at the beginning, it's very fast, much faster actually than what it was in Europe or US in previous years, given the globalization and the access to the information we have nowadays. Where India could go in terms of facade, well, this I could give this question to you. You guys are those designing. From our side, what we can do is support you. Actually, we welcome whatever new challenge you put to us, because this push the boundaries of our R&D. So we can develop something new, and this is the way the market and the technology evolves from needs. from specific needs. So you are collecting the needs from your clients and builders or whomever, and then you translate into an architectural masterpiece, and you get back to us, helping you to solve the issue, to evolve the technology. I'll give you one example, which is actually very consistent to my business and to Eternia, which is part of Hindalco. So one of the requests from the market was to have something stronger to support, to realize these windows or facades or doors, anything. So our R&D have been actually challenged by the market demand, and then they came up with this new alloy called Duranium, which is offering a higher strength. So it's more suitable to withstand to the severe climate condition eventually we have in India.
So Lorenzo, you almost stole the last question out of my hands. Okay, so next question.
Sorry for that.
Meant to, which is quite much. Actually, thanks for that, because the thing is that it's largely an open question. See, that this has got to do with the research and building systems, quite much what you were talking about. We, as architects, we often come up with technical issues in our practices. We are able to solve some of them through simple solutions or with available resource that we have around us. But sometimes these asks are actually slightly bigger. This is not specific to what you do. It's a more generic, larger kind of question. We as architects know the problem statement. When we are dealing with something, there is a problem. And this problem could be like in the sense that it could be technology based, it could be otherwise also. We don't often have the answers to this. That's largely also because we don't have the resource. And research needs to be done to arrive at the solution. So if you look at the Western world, the academia is very well equipped to handle this part of it. It happens even in India with the premier institutes like the IIT is doing a lot of work. But the problem is that this is cloistered into silos when it becomes academia. Okay. So in a certain way, the industry is the practical side of this, but the industry is driven by certain other factors. Okay. So, but the thing is that the industry has got the bandwidth, it's got the resource to actually help with research and what architects need as such. So can we as architects pose the problem to the industry, and the industry takes it up with its available resources and come up with much needed solutions? So is there something, like in the sense each one of you can actually chip in? Is there some kind of a problem that you're not able to solve that the industry needs to address, or they use their resource to address what we need in the sense? Because like exactly what Bharath said is that sometimes you want to do something, but you don't know what's possible around it, and you just pick whatever is the closest thing. It's like, I have this catalog available with us, just go for it. Why break your head over it? In the sense that we should not be limited. We should actually have the world at our hands. So any thoughts on this, on how we can pose a question, how the industry can answer us? Sriram, I think actually each one of you can actually just put in, this is the last question, so we can conclude after what we have our thoughts on this.
Yeah. So anyone going first?
You asked, why don't you go first?
Yeah, you go first.
No, it's just that I think it's interesting. I think using material and all that stuff is great. We also have as architects, I think, and in the industry, there's also this whole environment story that we really have to keep in mind, because there is an architects and builders and the whole construction industry has a huge part to play in this whole environment story, and the fact that there is a deterioration in the quality of our environment and so on. I think when you said research for material, I think it's spot on, because we really need to look at material that is more, I don't want to use the word sustainable because it's been done to death, but the fact is that, it has to be kinder to the environment. And whether you like it or you don't, cement is one of the material that is, spelling disaster to our environment for the amount of carbon dioxide emissions. So research and quality of material, the kind of material we really should use, is of paramount importance. And where academia, professionals, industry, all of us should come together and do it. But, always it's weighed down by commerce, economics, and business. So can you think of a world where we don't have cement? Impossible, right? Cement, glass, steel, but we are also polluting so much. So, it's good to hear Lorenzo spoke about.
There was a time cement was not there.
Fuel was not there. Fossil fuels were not there 120 years ago. Now we are trying to phase it out and go to electricity, right? Because it's just taken 100 years for us to see how much of damage it can do. So I think the need of the hour is to find research and find material that can do what some of our the current material we're using, so that it becomes relevant, and we at least have a world for our future generations. The way it's going, I don't even think we'll have one. So I think that is one of the main chief concerns. So you spoke about research. I just took a little bit of a deviation from that. That's my few pennies, you guys.
Ponni, what do you think we could pose as a problem to the industry? But I like Sriram's statement on kinder materials. Beautifully put. Okay.
I think your observations of how the Western world works, academic institutions have a very strong connect with industry. And I'm saying this with great validity because when I studied at Cornell University, we worked on a certain amount of research on radon housing and how radon actually adversely impacts on housing in the United States. And this research was carried on to industry and they made changes with it. So I have been talking to state governments and indeed the central government, and I've been telling them that you'll need to bring in industry and academia closer together. That there's no two ways about it, because it's an academic environment so that we understand problems at a leisurely pace, I might add. And where architecture is concerned, there is so much of interaction between practicing professionals and academia, which is a good thing. So that is on the other side of requesting government to make policy changes to bring these two segments together. And it is indeed going to be it will have a very positive effect on research. And instead of us doing this independent research and depending on industry, and always remember, industry is driven by profit, period. And of course, we have kinder industries. I also do a lot of work with them who try to develop products that are more kinder to the environment. But as architects, I think we are game changers and influencers. And if there are projects where I say, don't use UPVC anymore. It's so not good for the environment. Let's go in for metal. And people are listening today. Why? Because of climate change. There is going to be a system of tax credits being given in for sustainable projects in India. That's something I've been talking to the government about. So I think as architects, I think we are drivers of pushing this research issue, prompting manufacturers to bring in more environment-friendly products. So these are the only things that we as professionals can push, can advise. And I think a lot of it is going into the positive direction. We're doing a huge, huge project right now where I put my foot on and said, no UPVC. And the state government listened. Very shocking. I mean, it was a shocker for me too, because now people are understanding the meaning of climate change. Now people are understanding the meaning of degradation of materials and how that pollutes the earth. And it affects the very life forces that we depend on. So I think there's a lot of good steps taken, but I wish it was a lot faster.
Thank you, Ponni. Arvind, what are your thoughts on this?
Yes, I think profession and industry partnership consultation is very important. And I think, as Ponni also mentioned, we as architects can be trendsetters, can be influencers. So I think the industry, if it sets a mechanism where they involve feedback, I'm not asking us to get involved in the process of, design or, on that technical side, but feedback and that partnership, I think, can go a long way. And of course, Eternia being here today with us, I mean, let's take fenestration as an example. There are so many varieties and variations in the systems that are available to us. But how can we make this more affordable? And of course, the industry has moved away from timber. We are also not so favorably, we look at UPVC. So how can, aluminium become the center stage? It's already there in commercial projects, no doubt. And we use this quite, liberally, even in residences. But how can someone like Eternia's R&D come up with solutions which are technically or technologically so advanced, yet they don't cost us the moon, the client back home here, because sometimes systems are expensive and they are quite prohibitive for an average builder of a home. So this is a very specific point that I'm making, and the first feedback that maybe an architect could give. It's come from me.
Bharath.
See, in fact, if you see the flow of this particular topic, it started with Sriram voicing what is the need of the hour in terms of what is about research on getting the right things, and then Ponni spoke about the structure which is required to actually implement it, and then Arvind moved on to the cost aspect of it and how we can, it needs to be there. I think we are talking about a large change. It's not something, and I think Ponni was great in actually having a project where she could dictate, saying I'm not doing this, and a state government was happy. I'm not sure how many of us will have the luxury of starting to dictate things, and even if it is for the right cause, right? So it needs to be a movement that we all together need to come up with, and we as part of the industry, there is no fora for us to, even if the 6-7 of us today decide that okay, let's start doing this. What's the fora? How do we go about that? And this needs to be driven into a movement where we of course got the government to support this particular aspect, and finance does play an important role. But this cannot be done over. It has to flow in the same aspect that we just spoke about, all of us. And I think a particular fora is required for us to get there and get it moving. And hopefully we all have next generations have an earth to live in. And we'll try and see if we have a part to play in that. We are having a part to play in whichever way, but hopefully the nicer way.
So, Lorenzo, you are like one leg in the industry and one leg.
Yeah. I actually like all the comments. I have to agree with most and also disagree with some. So Ponni said the industry is mostly money driven, which is true in fact, but not totally. I mean, for an industry or for an R&D, we have to develop something. So if we are led with any guidance, then we just try to develop something which is maximizing the profit. But what is crucial and what is very important, again, as Ponni said, architects are game changers. So if, as an industry, we get your inputs, the designer's input, the architect input, then we are prone, and actually we are open and very much willing to give a certain orientation to our R&D in order everything becomes either eco-friendly or sustainable or cost-effective, as Arvind was saying, or innovative or whatever needed. So essentially the industry wants the input for the R&D to go in a certain direction, or eventually I can say wants and needs the input to go in a certain direction. Either it's from the architects, from the central government, or together.
So that's great. Lorenzo, so I hear you in the sense, in the sense that we're not ganging up on you. We are like 5 architects here and we have one, you're an architect too, but you're sort of representative of the industry. But I hear you where what I'm getting out of this is that if there is a need, the industry will respond.
Correct.
It's driven by commerce, meaning we all understand that in the sense, we also work in a world where it's driven by commerce, in the sense all of us need commerce. So if we can post it in a forum, we can work together, we can definitely put the world in safe hands. And like Sriram said, and Ponni echoed, and everybody else talking about that, we need kind materials, we need a kinder world that we can hand over to our children. So with this, I think we'll conclude this discussion. I hope it's been something that we can take back. It's been quite exciting for me. I hope it's been the same for all of you. And great to have such an interesting bunch of people in one room, even though it's virtual. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Sunil, and thank you, everyone.
Howling winds, leaking water, irritating noises, unwanted dust. Are your windows letting all unwanted guests in? Then it's time to switch to Eternia from Hindalco, an Aditya Birla Group company. Eternia are the world's only windows made with duranium. It is a specially invented alloy that enables Eternia windows withstand cyclonic winds and flaunt a stunning finish. Eternia windows are also Viva certified. They are tested and certified in a globally recognized independent lab to ensure that they provide superior protection from cyclonic winds, the heaviest of rains, noise, and dust. These quality factory-made windows come with India's first 12-year warranty on profiles and a 2-year warranty on moving parts, so you won't have to worry about anything even after years of installation. That's not all. Eternia windows come in unlimited colors and finishes. You can pick the ones that match your decor. Go ahead and find a window that will transform your home.